Chapter 36, Section 1. The election of 1992. Now, George H.W. Bush still was popular despite the economic problems. I mean, he was really helped out by the Gulf War. The Democrats are going to nominate Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was married to Hillary Rodham, who was a law student. Back when we talked about the Nixon impeachment considerations, the House Judiciary Committee, she was a staff member for that. Bill Clinton was opposed to Vietnam. He avoided the draft. He was governor of Arkansas. And Clinton told people voting for him was a 2-for-1 deal. You get him, but you also get his politically active wife, Hillary. In the election of 92, we're going to have an independent candidate that we have to mention here. Ross Perot. Ross Perot was a Texas billionaire. He wasn't a politician. He wanted to change the way the federal system was operating. Less influence for lobbyists. Greater voice to the public. He wanted to use his business skills as president, cutting government spending, balancing the budget. In this campaign between these three, Bush does not discuss the economy very much, because obviously that was a strike against him. Instead, Bush focused on the character of the other candidate. Some of Clinton's enemies referred to him as Slick Willie, referencing, that old-time con artist that would sell that cure-all medicine and come into town and swindle people out of their money. The results of this election: Clinton and his vice presidential candidate Al Gore are going to get 43% of the popular vote, 370 electoral votes, while H.W. Bush gets 37% of the popular vote, 168 electoral votes, and Perot gets 19% of the vote. He doesn't win any states, but he gets almost a fifth of the votes. That's more third-party votes since Teddy Roosevelt back in 1912. Many of the supporters of Perot were unhappy Republicans. They wouldn't vote for Clinton, they wouldn't vote Democrat, but they weren't happy with Bush, so they voted Perot. So a lot of people suspect that this might have helped Clinton win this election. You also got more women taking seats in Congress. 4 Democratic women senators were elected in this election. All right, so let's talk about Clinton's years in office. Let's start with some of the setbacks. One of the big setbacks he's going to have is going to be health care reform. A task force led by Hillary Clinton trying to address the rising costs of health care. This is one of the key things they had staked everything on, was health care reform, and it died in Congress. And so that's obviously going to be a setback when nothing occurs with it. You also have something called whitewater. There were going to be some questions about improper financial dealings in the Clintons' past. A failed real estate development in Arkansas is going to be the highlight of this investigation. And anytime you're being investigated, it's obviously going to be a setback. But as we look at the successes of Clinton, the budget is going to be passed to reduce the deficit, unemployment drops, inflation lowers, and the stock market is going to boom in the 90s. Now, every 2 years there's a congressional election. Not very often in this course have we talked about congressional elections, just here and there. But we need to talk about the congressional election of 1994. When Clinton took office, the economy was not doing so hot from H.W. Bush, and voters had hoped here 2 years in the recovery would have been faster. And so the Republicans are hopeful in this congressional election. And you're going to end up with this contract with America signed by many of the the Republicans. And it was their pledge that if you elect us to Congress, this is what we'll do. Things like balance the budget and stuff like that. And it works. Republicans win control of the House and Senate, both, for the first time since 1952. And Newt Gingrich is going to be Speaker of the House in Congress. Foreign dangers is going to be something that Clinton's going to have to pay attention to. You're going to see part of this from the fact that these former communist countries were kind of an unknown deal here. For example, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now that communism was gone, the Serbs, the Croats, the Slovenes are all fighting amongst themselves for control. You also have new republics from the former Soviet Union out there battling for power, battling for their control of former Soviet resources. For example, the Black Sea Fleet. Under Clinton, you're also going to see some turmoil in Africa. And turmoil in Africa is made even worse by the poverty and famine that was going on in Africa. Which brings us to Operation Restore Hope. In Somalia, there basically was no government anymore. There hasn't been government for a long time in Somalia here now, and the UN had been sending, countries have been sending through the UN food to Somalia. The thing is, the food was not getting to the starving people. Clans were fighting for power in Somalia, and they were hoarding the food. There were warehouses full of this food. Meanwhile, people were starving. If you control the food, you control the power. And so the UN is going to send forces in trying to help get control here. And Bush, H.W. Bush in 92 had sent in 27,000 U.S. troops to help out in this effort. And then in October of 93, 18 U.S. servicemen are killed in what becomes known through the movie called Black Hawk Down. And in 94, Clinton announces that we're pulling out of Somalia. You also have issues going on in the Middle East. Some peace efforts are going to be made here. The Palestinian leader was Yasser Arafat. The Israeli prime minister was Yitzhak Rabin. And Bill Clinton is going to get the two of them together, and he's going to get them to sign a peace accord. And Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, are going to agree to recognize each other. And there they are at the White House in 93 signing this peace accord. And this was a shining moment here for Clinton. But peace in the Middle East didn't last. In 1995, Rabin is assassinated by an Israeli extreme nationalist that didn't want peace with the Palestinians. And then his replacement in 96 is going to be Benjamin Netanyahu. He's going to be the new prime minister. And he pledged to be less willing to compromise. And violence breaks out again. In 2000, an Israeli government official is going to visit a contested religious site. And this visit causes violence to erupt out. And that Israeli government official becomes prime minister in 2001, Ariel Sharon. And violence continued in the Middle East. Let's talk terrorism. Because as the Cold War ended, terrorism increases. Terrorism wasn't brand new. U.S. leaders had always been very quick to respond to terrorism that we could link to a nation. For example, under Reagan, he's going to bomb Libya. The leader of Libya was Muammar Gaddafi, and there had been a nightclub in West Berlin that a bomb goes off. There's an attack. Um, it was a nightclub that a lot of U.S. soldiers frequented, and one U.S. soldier died. And when Reagan figured out Libya was responsible for this, Reagan didn't horse around and he bombed Libya. Clinton had even responded pretty quickly to terrorism threats. Clinton bombed the Iraqi intelligence service headquarters when the FBI discovered that there was an Iraqi plot to kill former President George H.W. Bush. Other big acts of terrorism that occurred in the world: 1988, Pan American Airlines flight is going to explode over Lockerbie, Scotland. 259 people were killed. Many of them were Americans. And there were 2 Libyans that were responsible. And Gaddafi refused to send them to the U.S. for trial. UN, Security Council put sanctions on Libya. They don't go to trial till the year 2000. In 98, bombs go off at the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, killing more than 200. Let's mention domestic terrorism, terrorism here at home. February 26, 1993, the World Trade Center is going to be bombed in New York City. 6 people are injured. Over 1,000 people were injured. Or 6 people are killed. Over 1,000 people are injured when a truck bomb goes off in the parking garage under one of the towers. And then you have April of 95. In April of 95, the federal building in Oklahoma City is going to be bombed, killing 168 people. It's going to be bombed by the guy down there in the bottom right, Timothy McVeigh. Parks a truck with a fertilizer bomb in it out front. And one of his co-conspirators up there in the top right there, Terry Nichols. McVeigh was eventually put to death, first federal prisoner put to death in a lot of years down in Terre Haute. In 1996, you got the Unabomber arrested. He had been mailing mail bombs to people. 16 bombs he mailed. 23 people were injured. 3 people die. Ends up being turned in by his brother when he figures out it was his own brother doing it. But Ted Kaczynski was this loner that lived out in the middle of nowhere up in the Northwest. And then in 96, the Summer Olympics were in Atlanta, and a bomb goes off. 1 person died, injured more than 100. And if you want to look into it, one of the sad instances here was one of the security guards was one of the first to report to it. I don't even remember his name, but he gets blamed for it. And they ruin his life, questioning him. He's all over the media as being responsible for it, and then they come to find out he didn't do it. The last thing we're going to talk about in this section is the role of the United Nations. Many people hope that the UN could become what it was intended to become since the Cold War was now over. Us in the Soviet Union, we kind of dominated everything with the Cold War. By the time you got to 92, thousands of UN forces were serving all over the world. Some forces were successful. Some were like Somalia, where there was mixed results. Bosnia and Herzegovina, there's going to be mixed results. By the end of 93, 150,000 people in Bosnia and Herzegovina had died due to ethnic fighting. And so the United Nations and NATO are going to send in peacekeepers. And they're also going to start investigating some accusations of war crimes, even genocide. The thing is, the Bosnian Serbs kept attacking. The peacekeepers were there to keep peace. They weren't there to fight. And so the Bosnian Serbs kept attacking. The U.S., Clinton doesn't do a lot until about 95 with this. And in 95, the U.S. and NATO begin bombing the Bosnian Serbs. By November of 95, the warring leaders are going to be brought to Ohio to talk peace, where they do reach an agreement. And part of the agreement did include a war crimes trial. And 20,000 U.S. soldiers are going to be sent to help NATO enforce this peace.